Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this performance of Opus 106 of Ludwig van Beethoven, 4 days after his 250th birthday. What a coincidence, huh? Anyway, it's lovely to meet you all, and it's a pleasure to talk about this sonata. I'll try not to take too long, but as my auntie in England would say, this piece is colossal. This is a colossal piece. I'll do the best I can. I'll try to go not too quickly, but I'll try to make this as brief as I can. This piece is so massive, it actually, if you do not take the repeat in the first movement, is just short of 1,200 measures. If you take the repeat, it's close to 1,300 measures. It is twice the size of his Opus 22 sonata in the same key, B flat major. Opus 106 is twice the size of that. It is half again as large as the next largest sonata, which is his Opus 53, the Waldstein sonata. This piece was absolutely a mammoth work that Beethoven, even when he sent it off to be published, said to the publisher back in 1819, "Now there you have a sonata that will keep the pianists busy when it is played 50 years hence." Beethoven knew he had something that was huge. It's so huge that it also is increasing the amount of pitches that he uses on the piano. The piano had gotten larger and larger in terms of its range. This is for a piano that was 6 octaves and 5 keys beyond what had been a piano of 5 octaves, all the way from the C that is very close to the very bottom of the piano to the top F on the piano. That was the range of this piano by virtue of what he writes in this piece. In that same year, he had received the gift of the Broadwood piano that Thomas Broadwood had promised to him. He received the piano in May. Beethoven had already, May of 1818, Beethoven had already written the first 2 movements of the sonata. So the last 2 movements, there's a very good chance that it was under the influence of that brand new piano that he had gotten from London. He began the work in late 1817. And so the work went over a number of months, probably a year's worth of time, from 1817 to 1818, and it got published in 1819 in Vienna. Each movement begins with a third. The piece is very simply composed. It's based on a simple interval, meaning a distance between 2 pitches. A third is going from one letter, skipping a letter, to the next letter. On the piano, it's like going from one white key, skipping a white key, and going to the next white key. That's a third. If you turn that around, if you put the bottom one above the other one, you get what's called a sixth. If you take the top one and you put it below the bottom one, you also get a sixth. So the interval of a sixth and the interval of a third have a close relationship. Third, sixth. A to C is a third. C to A is a sixth. In this case, the piece is in B flat major. Good notes to keep in mind are B flat to D is a third. D to B flat is a sixth. The thirds and the sixths are the sweetest intervals, sounds of 2 sounds coming together on the piano of any of the intervals. And Beethoven exploits those intervals across the whole piece. There's a rich tradition of thirds and sixths being used for harmonization, and Beethoven is tapping into that. There's a real simplicity and also a real lineage to the past in this piece, in Beethoven's writing. In the very first movement, Beethoven starts with a low B flat and then has a D as the top voice of 3 pitches that he sounds. That interval is a very wide third. Each movement starts with the interval of a third. The third is something that Beethoven has been working on for years. In fact, 10 years earlier, he wrote something, 3 notes that went down a third, 3 notes that went down a third, 3 notes that went down a third, and then a third was put underneath that last one. And in the key signature, there were 3 flats of that particular piece. So this is something that Beethoven is always thinking about and always exploring in his composition. How can I have very simple elements that then can be the bedrock or the atomic fusion that then can create something that is massive? And that's what happens in this Opus 106. Okay, the first movement. The first movement is in 2, meaning there are 2 beats in a measure, okay? Boom, 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 boom. And Beethoven decides to write this at the very beginning. Ba-yum, ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, bum. Each of those 2 large beats has 2 smaller beats in it, and that motive that he uses goes across 6 beats of time. Ba-yum, ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, bum. Ba-yum, ba-bum, bum-ba-bum, bum. That's 6 units of time. So time unit is used in relationship to pitch interval, distance between pitches. The sound of pitches as it relates to the organization or the flow of time. This is vintage Beethoven. Another motive that's in the first movement is ba-ba-beek-dum, ba-ba-teek-pum. He uses 2 little notes, 2 eighth notes, and then he uses a large note value, a half note, that has 2 sets of 2 eighth notes in it. Bum, 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 ba. And then an arrival pitch. That's a total of 6 little units that then take you to an arrival. Not far from that, he has a motive that is yum, bum, bim, bum, bum, bum. Yes, 6 events across 8 units of time. Bum, bim, bum, 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 bum. This is Beethoven. I sing those for you so that you'll be able to hear that. That's a way to go across the whole first movement, is to listen for ba-yum, ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, bum, bum-ba-bee-dum, and bum, ba-yum, bum, bum, bum. That'll help you. Okay? Those act as fodder for all of the things that Beethoven is going to do across that movement. But what Beethoven does that's very interesting is he has what's called a sonata structure, which really is about key action, how keys or collections of pitches in different keys act to create contrast to each other, sort of a protagonist-antagonist relationship, not unlike a Greek drama. The first set of pitches is B-flat major. The second set of pitches, meaning the second key area in this piece, is G major. Yes, it's true. B-flat to G is either a third going down or B-flat to G, a sixth going up. So the relationship of the keys for the music that he's writing is also using the 3 or the 6. So all of these things are going on in that first movement. The second movement is a scherzo. Scherzo means joke, and the joke essentially is joking on the minuet from back in the 1780s. Of course, this is around 1817, 1818, so this is 30 years later. The French Revolution has already taken place. The American Revolution has already taken place. All of these middle-class uprisings have taken place. Sociologically, the scherzo now has taken on its own life as its own kind of piece, but back in 1780s, it was a joke on the minuet or the dance that the aristocracy would dance. And so it was a play on how the music interacted with the dance, and that's where the name scherzo came from. But it became one of the standard movements, and this is a movement that would have been a minuet and trio if Beethoven had written this sonata 100 years, well, not maybe 100 years earlier, but let's say 50 years earlier. Okay. This sonata has this figure in it. Yum ba dum bum. And that gets repeated again and again. What happens in the Scherzo with Beethoven is the Scherzo is in 3 units of time, in what's called 3/4 meter. The minuet also was in 3/4 meter. But Beethoven speeds up the Scherzo to the degree to which it becomes pairs of measures. And you know, 2 sets of 3 is going to become 6. So, this is what Beethoven writes. Yum ba dum bum bum ba dum bum beep ba dum bum beep ba dum bum beep ba dum bum beep ba dum bum boom boom. Whoa! That was a surprise. Typical Beethoven. What he does is he does 3 pairs of measures. In other words, 6 measures. Yum ba dum bum ba dum bum. That's 1 pair. He does another. Yum ba dum ba dum bum. Second pair. Then he does another one. Yum ba dum bum ba dum bum. Third pair. And then he goes bang bang. These are called spondees. These are sort of pounding of a hammer metrically in the piece that throw you off. Oh my God, well, where am I now? And of course, yes, it turns into 7 measures. Well, Stravinsky, here we come. But you'll hear now, I've sing the whole first phrase, that you'll hear the 3 sets of pairs and then the bang bang. Yum ba dum bum ba dum bum ba dum bum ba dum bum bang bang. And then he's disrupting the fact that you probably want yet another pair, which would be a nice grouping of 2 sets of 2 sets of 2 pairs. But he doesn't do that. You're going to hear that happening in the piece a number of times. He has a trio to this, which is a contrasting section, where he takes the beats and he puts triplets under it, which is groups of 3 little notes. And you can listen for that as well. This is playing around with the number 3 as it interacts with the number 2, and then how it then adds into 6 or units of larger than 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay, there's a cadenza in this movement where he has a triplet, 3 notes, to 2 sets of 2 notes. Yes, that's 7. I know, it's not 6. But guess how many times I just sang that? 6 times. That's what he does. It's as though he's trying to show you the whole range of the instrument. He goes from the bottom of the instrument all the way to the top, and the top pitch of the cadenza is the F, highest pitch of the piano at the time that he's writing for. It's quite something. Beethoven's very revealing historically in this piece. So that's a cadenza that occurs, and then you'll hear there's a little like this jiggling of notes. There are, by the way, 12 jiggles in there. Not pairs, but single. 12 events. There's silence, and then bum-ba-dum, bum, bum-ba-dum, bum. It comes back again. All right? So that's the Scherzo movement. That's the second movement. The third movement is in a slow 6. The slow 6 has a rich history. It's related to what's called the Siciliano, which is often associated with the pastoral. What's interesting is that the pastoral key, Beethoven even writes a 6th symphony, pastoral symphony, is F major. That 6th symphony by Beethoven is also in F major. This movement is in F sharp minor. Beethoven is also playing around with just off by 1 half step. A half step is from one thing to the very next thing on the piano, one key to the next key. There are 2 places where you can do that, from white key to white key, or a white key to a black key, or a black key to a white key. Right next, F sharp, F. He's off by 1 half step from the pastoral key, but this is in the pastoral feeling of the slow 6/8. What's interesting is Beethoven, I don't know, about probably a minute and a half into the piece, maybe it's 2 minutes into the piece because it's rather slow, he does this. He has has a waltz bass. It's almost as though he's writing a little nocturne, melodic line, or an aria above a waltz. This movement has interesting key relationships as well. He has music that comes back, and then other music that comes back. You'll hear what we call rhyming of music, where the music is in one key, and then it comes back in another key. It's in a different key, and it comes back in another key. What's interesting is he creates an interactive relationship. He has some music that is in F sharp minor that comes back in D major. Yes, that's a third or a sixth away. He has music in D major that comes back in F sharp major. Yes, that's a third or a sixth away. But what's interesting is the difference between the F sharp minor, F sharp major is just a half step. The difference between something that's major or minor is just a half step. It's a different way to use a half step. That same music that was in D major, that comes back in F sharp major, then comes in G major. The fact that he brings G major in this piece, yes, is a half step away from F sharp major. But G major is also the second key area of the first movement, which was radical. The first movement was in B flat major for the first key area, and then the second key area of it was G major. And yes, G is a third away from B flat, unless you want to say it's a sixth away from B flat. When Beethoven goes back to G major in this movement that's in F sharp minor, he's actually foreshadowing the fact that he's going to be going back to B flat major for the fourth movement. Okay? In this movement, by the time we've gotten to this movement, Beethoven is going to F sharp major, which has 6 sharps in the key signature. He has also gone to G flat major, 6 flats. So the key of 6 sharps, the key of 6 flats he goes to in this piece. It's a real 6 piece. Yeah. When I was first thinking about talking about the piece, I was thinking I would talk about Beethoven's 6th sense. Yeah, it's interesting how simple the construction of the piece is for something that is so massive. The last movement begins with a very slow introduction. It's actually largo, and he starts with the pitch F, and he has 6 pitches F. 6 pitches, repetitions of F, and then widely spaced octaves of F. It's almost as though he's correcting the pastoral key for what it should have been maybe in the movement before. It's very interesting how he's playing around, I feel, with these ideas of key relationships. He has a bit of an allegro, and then he goes back to the largo before he then has what's called an Allegro Resoluto section. And in the Allegro Resoluto, he has a fugue. And one could call it even a double fugue. He has a fugue based on one sort of music subject or kernel of music. And then he has a fugue on another kernel of music. And then he brings the first music back again, which is not unlike this whole idea of sonata structure of having something that comes back again. In this case, it's coming back to the same key that he started in, B flat. Anyway, he uses these little motives for the fugue, again, based on 6. The one motive for the very beginning, first part of the fugue, is pakatikataka. Pakatikataka. There's a feeling of an impulse, a rest, and then 6 16th notes. Pakatikataka. Pakatikataka. He then regroups that by, well, he doesn't regroup it. He then shifts it in the metric structure of it, and he goes dakatikataka. So, bakataka-taka, which is 6 units. You feel a scooping into it. And then he goes bakatika-taka, where he goes like this, and then has this byproduct of 5 events after the first event. 6 events. He also has this motive, bapatatitata, patakatitata, patikatata, patikatata, which again is 6 units. Later, the slow fugue section that he has is bum 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 So I'm singing these things for you so that maybe you'll be able to hear some of these things and cue into it. Know that Beethoven is playing around with interval, thirds, the sweetest interval. Or sixths. Those are the sounds of 3 and 6. And then 3 and 6 sounds are created by virtue of rhythms that occur in the piece. And so listen for these groupings. Remember that cadenza that's going to go to that highest pitch. And know that after it's happened and you've gotten to the highest pitch, you did this. And then you're at the top. Okay? Have fun. 3s, 6s for 106. Take care, everybody, and be safe and be well.